Alrighty, it's district breakdown time. There he is, Diggsy, my main man. They call him Mr. Money in the Bank because he always knows what to say about these districts. And we got 6-6A coming right now, and I'd love to hear your thoughts because Marcus has kind of won it the last couple of years. They tied for it last year or whatever. But what do you think of this district this year?
I'll be honest with you because you can hold me accountable to things because we've been working on this stuff for 2-3 months now. And when I submitted my preseason rankings and things like that to you, I was very high on Louisville. Ethan Terrell coming back, Byron Ellison made all district running back with Damian Martinez winning MVP last year. He got injured. He stepped in admirably. But when you really start to dig into Louisville a little bit, they lost one of their big studs at free safety. A couple other people have transferred out. Louisville just, I don't know if they have the depth to overcome some of those losses that they've had. Ethan Terrell is going to be a fantastic quarterback. I feel like they are very well set at quarterback. I think they are definitely a playoff team in this district. But after really kind of going into Marcus and what they have coming back, I had to flop them. I've got Marcus as my number one team in this district. Louisville is a very talented team. Their offensive line is fantastic, but I'm really worried about on the defensive side of the ball. If they're going to just have the depth to compete in this district, I think they'll be good. I think they're going to make the playoffs. But Ashton Cozart at wide receiver, Cole Welliver, hopefully Marcus won't be doing that quarterback rotation now. Isaac Katab, Jake Ballard, and we've talked about Midlothian and Midlothian heritage in some of our 5A shows. Marcus always has a good offensive line. They always have good linebackers. They always have a good defensive line. Something about the water over there in that part of Flower Mound. I mean, look at you, Ward. I mean, you understand this Flower Mound side of things. Marcus, I think, has to be considered the odds-on favorite to win this district.
Well, and you bring up the Flower Mound side of things. Let's talk about our personal teams. My kids are going to Flower Mound. Yours will eventually go to Plano East, I'm assuming. So what do you think about those two teams before we get into some other things? Just because, as on a personal note, what do you think about your beloved Plano East, or did you want to wait till last to talk about them?
I mean, I could talk about. We could have an hour. We could be digging the wisdom with Plano East and just spend an hour talking about it. The energy with Coach Benedetto over there is just fantastic. But still, when you've been as down as Plano East has 3-4 wins over the last 3 years, it's a building process, and the building process doesn't necessarily go from going 2-8 to being second in this district. But one thing that I think Plano East has going for it is when this realignment was announced, I think a lot of people started to grumble like, oh, we got the Louisville ISD schools again, and here we go again. But when you really dig into this district, it is not a very strong district. We're only going to see 2 of these teams ranked in our top 25. And after that, when I look at this and we go through 1-8, and I don't think you're going to agree with me on my number 8, by the way. But when we go through this on 1-8, this is the kind of district where the number 8 team could legitimately be the number 2 team. The distance between 2 and 8 in this district is not very much. And when you look at what happened last year, you look at Plano East only got 1 district win when they beat Plano West, but Plano West beat Flower Mound and they beat Plano, and Plano East had some injuries last year. You look at that and go, well, if they would have done this, if they would have done that, they could have, they lost to Coppell late in that game. They could have made the playoffs in that district. And then you look at Plano West, and you can have the same ramifications. You talk about Coppell, you can kind of have that same flow chart. Well, if this happened, I think Coppell could get here. You look at Flower Mound. If this happened and this happened, you can see that. I've actually got Flower Mound 8th in this district. I think losing Nick Evers, they are going to – they got that really good tight end, Caden Jensen, coming back. Peyton Porter looks like a really good running back. Walker Mulkey is one of my favorite receivers last year. He was just one of those gutty, just catch anything, do anything for his team kind of players. Yale Erdman is expected to take over at quarterback. I just don't know if they have the depth compared to some of the Plano schools in Coppell, pulling from 4,000 or 5,000 kids to compete in this district. But again, like I said, 8-2 is not a very wide gap. because Louisville, I think, I'm not as high on Louisville. They're the number 2 team in this district for me. But again, 2-8, not very strong. But I don't think there's going to be any pushovers. I think this is one of those districts where you might see a 5-way tie at 3 and 4 for the last playoff spot. It is very evenly matched, and every game is gonna come down and boil down. And then when you look at the big picture, very much like last year, I think all 7 or 8 teams are in it to the last week. Anything can happen in this district board.
Well, that little rant there leads me to 2 questions. Actually, the first one is that, Plano ISD. It's been a while since they've been in the postseason. The way you're talking, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen maybe this year. Maybe they can, one of those 3 teams. If you're saying Plano East may not be the team, can West or Plano High find a way into the postseason? Maybe a short trip to the postseason, but in there nonetheless.
Why do you want to call it a short? Are you looking at that 5-6A district talked about last week and go, well, that's Allen in the first round? You don't think any of the Plano teams could compete with Allen this year?
I don't know, sir. I'm going to leave that up to you to tell me.
Well, when you look at all 3 of these teams, the expectation from the athletic director level has really been pushed up in Plano. Both my boys are no longer coaching over at Plano. And we have new coaches over there. And the last Plano ISD coach that's made it, Coach Sukup, he's the kind of the old guard now over at Plano ISD. So I think everything is open in here. And we have lots of new coaches in this district. Hebron hired Coach Towles, who is a former Plano East assistant coach. You can always bring it back to Plano East. He messaged me when I was talking about Hebron and wondering kind of had some questions about Hebron. He's like, Diggs, I was in your selfie with Coach Ringo. Why are you gonna do that to me? I can't do that to Coach Towles. He's a good coach, and he's coming in with a lot of excitement. Hebron, for me, is a team that I think has a really high upside. I think Hebron has the best chance to supplant Louisville at the number 2 seed. Coppell has a new coach. Coach Wiley came over from Hershey. Of course, Coach Benedetto over at Plano East. It's like the 3 Louisville schools. You got Marcus, Louisville, and Flower Mound. They're the old guard now with the coaching experience. So it's kind of odd that I'm picking Flower Mound to be last, but when I looked at their JV and kind of their talent coming back. And again, that's not, a lot of teams we look at and you think to yourself, wow, I don't think this number 8 team could beat a number 2 or number 1 team. I don't think, Thomas Jefferson's going to be competing with Woodrow Wilson and South Oak Cliff. Flower Mound's going to compete with, we get the Mound Showdown, anything can happen. Flower Mound can compete with all the Plano schools. They can, and they've done very well historically against the Plano schools. I think the Plano schools are up, but I don't think that's going to, I can't pick any of the Plano schools in good conscience right now to make the playoffs. I think they're going to be 5, 6, 7. I think they're going to be right there in the mix. But when you look at history, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And the Plano schools haven't been beating the man lately.
That's right. That's true. And a couple of the teams you mentioned that may make playoff spots, I lean towards them because of playmakers on the defensive side. You talk about Braxton Myers at Coppell and Carson Dean at Hebron. Carson Dean, man, I was looking at some of his tape recently. The guy he's just hungry. It's like he knows the snap count on every play, and he's hungry to make plays every single time. So that in a district that you say is down, a guy like that could turn a game around and turn a loss into a win.
What about Carson's brother Connor? I mean, that guy is a playmaker as well. And Hebron also has Trenton Bronoff coming back at wide receiver, Braxton Baker coming back at quarterback. Hebron's got a lot going for it right now and a lot of playmakers. Coppell, for me, Jack Fishball returns at quarterback. He was a good quarterback last year. I don't know if he's going to be what takes Coppell to the next level. But again, he did last year, so can he repeat it this year? Plano East has got their quarterback coming back through DeVilliers. Rushiel Patel is coming back at wide receiver. Brian Dyer, the really good, talented tight end, is coming back. Plano East had some players. And talk about quarterbacks in this district. I know this week you saw Plano West quarterback at its finest, Vance Feuerbacher. What did you see? Because you were there seeing that. I mean, is he a playmaker? Because they had a little bit of a rotation last year. but it looks like he's coming into his own this year.
Yeah, I tell you what we saw was a strong arm. We saw a kid that came out there and wanted to prove something against the other quarterbacks we had out there. His accuracy and strength of the arm was something else. So I rushed home to see what the problem was last year, and it doesn't look like he may not have the skill receivers to get it to.
Yeah, Plano West is going to struggle at the receivers, but they got their good running back, Dermont White, coming back. Really good linebacker, Johnny Ingram, the fourth. He trolls me on Twitter, so I'm watching you, Ingram. I'm watching you, sir. But Plano West does have those questions. But Plano West, again, they've had those questions every single year, and they find a piecemeal a way to get a game that they're not supposed to. Last year it was against Flower Mound where they won a game that they shouldn't, but then they lose to Plano East in a convincing fashion. Plano West has to be more consistent, I think, and Plano has these questions as well. Their quarterback Austin Gonzalez, who a lot of people were very high on, transferred to Lovejoy, and I don't know if he's even going to see the field over at Lovejoy, but Drew Faulkner is expected to step in for Plano. Plano has done very well in 7-on-7. Plano competed and did much better than Plano East at 7-on-7. We know that 7-on-7 doesn't always equate to the 11-man game, but Plano has some good receivers, and they've got some really good size on the offensive line. So I think Plano's going to be right there as well. Coppell, new coach, you have questions there. Hebron, new coach, you'll have some questions there. Flower Mound, you have some questions on the depth. Every team except for Marcus, in my opinion, has some questions. So it's really going to be about, it's an exciting time because we're going to talk about some of these other districts. Next week we're going to talk 7-6A, and I'll just give you a little bit of a spoiler. I don't think Irving is looking at this district, we can get second or we can get third in this district. They're going to struggle to get 1 or 2 district wins. 7 teams in this district can legitimately look at a playoff run, or all 8 teams can look at a playoff run, but I think 7 can look at second place as a very achievable goal in this district. No offense to my friends in Louisville. I'm not saying that you guys haven't earned the right to be slotted there in the preseason, but Plano East played Louisville to a touchdown last year. So, I mean, that is the kind of parity we're going to have in this district, and I think we're going to see it again this year as well. I got Marcus 1. I got Louisville 2. I've got Hebron 3, Coppell 4. I'm just going to put Plano East, Plano West, and Plano in a 3-way tie for 5th, and Flower Mound 8th.
I got you. All right, well, we'll see what happens, and then I'm sure they'll go far once they play the 5-6A teams in the playoffs. I'm sure they have quite a journey in the postseason. But
hey, it might be one and done, but you never know. And Marcus, again, they have some, depending on who Marcus draws in the first round, if they get stuck with Geyer for whatever reason again, or Prosper, they've struggled with that first round, getting a very good team in the first round and having some injury bugs. I remember a couple of years ago, their good quarterback got hurt right in the Plano East game, and then they struggled against Prosper. So Marcus is due a win that they haven't quite had yet. So watch out for Marcus, but everybody else in the district, I think you're going to see a lot of parity.
All righty. Well, 7-6A is next, and I will talk to you next week, Diggsy.
We'll get our Scotties out for that one.
Fight.